Die Unterscheidung von Vergangenheit, Gegenwart und Zukunft ist nichts als eine Illusion. Alles ist miteinander verbunden.
Dark's opening monologue invites you right into the heart of its story by handing you a thread to follow deep into a small town named Winden, where prominently wraps around its occupants, prompting you to witness the cause and effect each of their actions have on one another, as well as the town itself. And watching this unfold is what makes Dark so incredibly gripping, but it is its very aspect that can make approaching its story intimidating at first glance. To show you what I mean, let's look at its structure in the pilot episode, compared to where we arrive in the last episode of the last season. And it's quite a lot to unpack. But I'm here to make a case for why this criminally overlooked saga is absolutely worth the ride, and how you truly owe it to yourself to experience one of the most meticulously laid out narratives ever made. Stories are extremely important to me in all of their mediums, and I consider myself lucky because many of them left that profound impact on me that I always hope for. At times, even enough for me to revisit certain works throughout different stages of my life, but never before have I had the urge to do so immediately after the curtains close on the final act. Dark undoubtedly draws you into that second watch, and both sittings are equally worth your time as you enter the latter experience armed with knowledge that allows you to appreciate foreshadowing and metaphors that have been peppered throughout the series. The payoff appearing as early as the opening sequences when watched through this new lens make you realize that you've been observing a bit of the story unfold from the very beginning, and you can't wait to see what else you'll catch as you re-enter Winden with this new perspective in mind. A big part of Dark's rewatch value comes from the fact that this is a story centered around time travel and the human actions of our characters that unknowingly entangle them into a knot that they will spend the rest of the series trying to undo. And time travel stories are inherently complicated and can be notorious for gaping plot holes, confusing physics, or unreal expectations to suspend your disbelief. To be honest, I would not have given the show a time of day if it hadn't come heavily recommended from a trusted source. To my surprise, I found most of these tropes don't apply to Dark, and that was refreshing. The plot does become increasingly more intricate, particularly in its third and final season, but information is conveyed in a way that makes revelations make sense, and I found myself surprised at being able to recite relationships back to myself as time went on. In fact, I found this to be one of the show's biggest strengths, the competent way of relaying information to its audience. A very important characteristic for a show that asks you to follow along a ever-growing family tree. The writers consistently provide all the tools you need, and no information is ever withheld for the sake of a cheap cliffhanger or some drawn-out meandering mystery, so you never feel misled or betrayed by any of its many revelations. This builds trust, and while I had many worries and reservations about how they could possibly wrap up such a behemoth of a story, as time went on, I gained genuine confidence in the creators to deliver in this area. But more on that later. Let's start at the beginning. Season 1, Episode 1. A story is presented to us, and it's following the typical rules of a narrative structure. We're introduced to our protagonist, Jonas, who becomes our proxy for exposition. Through him, we learn that his small, sheltered town is preoccupied with the recent disappearance of a teenage boy, and the subsequent investigation that doesn't seem to be going too well, leading to heavy scrutiny of the inexperienced Winden police unit. The boy's absence stirs up various emotions within the community, and our focus shifts to a very specific group of residents, those who are members of one of the 4 central families that make up Winden. And we get our first glimpse of their relationship with each other, something that will be heavily built on and becomes a pivotal element of the show. Once this foundation has been established, Jonas will be subjected to a critical life event, and this inciting incident motivates him to propel the plot forward. But the more forward it goes, the more you realize that the story wasn't ever really presented to us. We were presented to the story at a carefully chosen point on a timeline of events that have already been in motion long before we were ever privy to it. And the choice to include us right here was not because it was the beginning, but because at this exact moment in time, Jonas is still just as naive and ignorant to his world as we are, allowing us to organically learn along with him, which turns out to be a truly addicting endeavor. This urgent need to know more makes Dark very bingeable, which undoubtedly works in its favor, as it encourages a consistent watch, helping you gain the best understanding possible, which segues right into another tool that helps your understanding feel a little more effortless, and that is the fantastic choice in casting. Because this is a venture through time, you inevitably encounter at least 2 versions of most of the characters in their respective time periods, and the physical resemblance between their older and younger selves can be downright uncanny. This is only complemented by the actors' impressive way of mimicking their counterparts' mannerisms, having me completely sold on the idea that they're one and the same person. If a character isn't immediately recognizable, then they'll have distinctive attributes unique to them, clarifying which version of a character you're watching at any given time. These traits are also cleverly implemented to make some revelations that, quite frankly, blew me away. Another visual inclusion I truly appreciated were the musical montages nested within many, if not all of the episodes. They're to beautifully summarize particular themes and use juxtaposition to really drive some of the emotional messages home, always accompanied with excellent scores that comfortably stand on their own on my playlist, oftentimes revitalizing that lingering feeling that was left on my initial watch. To my delight, these were kept until the very end, not once feeling out of place or repetitive. And I'm going over all this to say that on a technical level, Dark is incredible, succeeding in every avenue. And in my opinion, that's what constitutes about half of what makes it so great. Let's talk about the other half, which is the sublime, impressively written story. One that makes it evident that it has been meticulously crafted from inception to its very conclusion, quickly cementing itself as one of the best I've ever seen. Cognizant not to overstay its welcome, it's deliberate in everything it shows, and by providing only essential information, it assures that not a single scene is wasted, no character is unimportant, and no plot point aimless. As promised from the very beginning, it masterfully connects it all. But talking about the overarching plot is rather difficult without spoiling major events, and I don't want to rob you of the opportunity to experience them for yourself, which I really hope you do. So I will do my best to thread very lightly around some of the major themes without outright giving anything of significance away. Earlier we established that during its introduction, the focal point of this time travel story is the mystery surrounding a missing teenager, misleadingly setting itself up as a menacing sci-fi crime genre, earning it a comparison to shows like Stranger Things, among others. But you learn fairly quickly it's a far gritty departure from that, as it lends its unique tone to question free will, grapple with existentialism, explore a battle of clashing ideologies, display the powerful impact of grief and regret, but also love and sacrifice. The first hint of what's to come was seeing characters at odds with themselves, quite literally, as jaded older versions of them begin to appear, but are noticeably so far removed from who they once were that you can't help but wonder, what could have possibly happened to make them become this way? They appear as ambiguous enigmas that either mentor their younger selves, manipulate them, or outright attempt to eliminate them. Some feel wronged by the world and act out in rage and resentment, unnecessarily cruel at times, while others make remorseful pit stops along the way, trying to make a gaping wound feel better if only for a moment, but like ghosts disappear back into the night.
Du bist ein so guter Mensch. Aber das warst du schon immer. Die Welt hat dich nicht verdient.
Verstehe nicht.
Das wirst du eines Tages.
Du bist ein zu guter Mensch, Papa.
Die Welt hat dich nicht verdient.
Their differences are plenty. Behind each of their actions remain ripples that are bound for collision, their overlap leading to results beyond their understanding. And yet it is the very thing they share that fuels them, something fundamentally human, a flawed chase after their own personal paradise, doing whatever is necessary if it means protecting those they cherish the most. This was my roundabout way of saying this show is nothing short of spectacular, and I hope you allow it to leave an imprint on you as it did on me.
Ich glaube, ich habe gerade ein Déjà-vu. Das Licht, der Wald, als ob das alles schon mal passiert ist.
Wenn die Welt eine Simulation ist, dann ist ein Déjà-vu ein Fehler in der Matrix.
Oder eine Botschaft aus dem Jenseits.